So you want to be more memorable when you talk. Chances are if you're watching this video, you may have held one or more limiting beliefs throughout your life around something along the lines of the best storytellers are born. I completely disagree with that. I'm a firm believer that good storytellers aren't born out of luck or natural talent. The best storytellers in this world are born out of practice.
Listen, we talking about practice.
By knowing the right techniques and avoiding the wrong ones. Almost like a master puppeteer knowing what strings to pull during the show that draws the audience in. And if you think about it, the audience know that they're watching a show, but still they get lost in the experience of the story. And that's exactly what you are ultimately trying to achieve through the message and the stories that you are sharing to your audience. So with that said, here are the 3 techniques to allow your next video, podcast interview, event, or workshop to be the most unforgettable yet. Apply them and watch the magic happen. Number 1, open a loop. See, the thing is, every time you go to speak to someone or start a new conversation, you are opening up an invisible loop in the other person's mind, along with a countdown timer that starts ticking as soon as you open your mouth. And when that happens, you've got 2 goals. The first one is to spark enough curiosity for them to keep on listening to you. And the second one is to close that curiosity loop in the quickest time possible before they start to zone out. And the more loops you open and close throughout that given amount of time, the more engaged they're going to be in what you're saying. I want you to read these next examples and notice the effect on your brain. Walking 10,000 steps helps you lose weight. A good story gets you more readers. Eating blueberries is good for your skin. Now, if I was able to get a magical projector to show me the brain activity of your brain on this wall in front of me, not a lot would be happening. And that's the thing that happens when you start with a closed loop, when you don't open with enough intrigue or curiosity. You essentially put people's brains into an induced coma. Now compare it with these. How a college kid shot an indie film on his phone and sold it to Hollywood. How one of my students won over new clients and his new girlfriend with one simple storytelling template. And what about this one? The 5-letter word that will increase the amount of sex you have with your partner. Do you notice how magically your brain has sprung back to life? I like to compare this to that irresistible itch when you are solving a crossword after reading that first hint. You know, you can't not go find out the answer. The point is, when you open curiosity loops in your conversations or stories, you essentially speak in a way where people have to keep listening to you. You write as if people have to keep reading what you're going to say next. And this is how you allow people to get captivated with every word that you say. And it's using this simple framework. Open loop, close the loop, open another loop, close the loop again, rinse and repeat until satisfied. Number 2, know your ending and then start in the opposite. The truth is, I've ruined 90% of movies out there. Since I was a kid, I started obsessing and becoming a student of stories. When you got DVDs back in the day, they would always come with 2 discs. The first disc was the actual movie itself, and the second disc was called Special Features. And that essentially had the cast and crew talking about industry secrets, talking about behind the scenes, bloopers, all that fun stuff. But what I also realized is they were sharing a lot of storytelling secrets. And this was essentially a masterclass in filmmaking and storytelling. And what I realized is every popular movie starts off with the character experiencing or feeling one state of emotion, and then by the end of the movie, they experience a complete opposite. Now, the greater that gap, and the greater the amount of loops that they open and close throughout that gap, the greater the emotional transformation, and the more that we can connect to that character and that story by the end of the movie. Classic example is Harry Potter. Lonely, abandoned, no purpose. By the end of the film, or the film series, supported, loved, completely fulfilled in his mission. And his entire character arc and transformation as a human leaves us feeling inspired. And it's why it's one of the most masterful displays of the hero's journey and the good versus evil archetype. Here's another example. Do you notice that every rom-com film out there Starts off with two strangers that hate each other, and then throughout the movie, they magically fall in love. And despite us knowing how every romance film is going to end, we still get bought into the story because of the gap that is from the start to the end, and it keeps us engaged throughout. And despite us knowing how it's going to end, we get so connected and involved in how that transformation is going to play out. So before you go to tell a story, you want to nail these 3 points. Ask yourself, what's the core emotion you want your audience to feel by the end? Then it's a matter of starting a story during a time where you felt the exact opposite emotion. The greater the gap, the greater the transformation, which leads to you being more memorable and impactful in the eyes of your audience. The third technique is called normal twists, and this is something I learned in the world of stand-up comedy. I personally have so much respect for stand-up comedians, so much so that in 2022, I put together a 5-minute comedy set and went around Melbourne and performed them live on open mics. Still to this day, greatest character development ever. But what I also learned was how to write jokes and inject humor into stories and mundane moments, which is essentially taking your audience on a familiar journey that's predictable in their mind and then completely zagging the other way and providing a twist. Brace yourselves, I got a few examples for you. If a dog licks its balls in public, nobody cares. But when I do, everyone's screaming, "What are you doing to that dog?" I have a Polish friend who's a sound technician. Oh, and I've also got a check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2. A Mexican magician says he will disappear on the count of 3. He says, uno, dos, poof. He disappeared without a trace. All right, are you still alive? You still with me? If you're wanting to inject humor into your stories, you want to follow this simple framework. Select an average moment from your life where only you know that something random and unexpected happens. And then focus on the average, normal, then expand on the unexpected, twist. Now, injecting humor and jokes and comedy into your stories is great, but you want to use it with caution. So almost like using sugar when it comes to baking. Too much of it and you're going to completely kill the flavor of the recipe. Same thing with humor. Put too much and people are going to be hysterical throughout the story and not actually remember the emotional impact that this story has. So again, use it with caution. Now, I'm going to take those 3 and I'm going to tell you a story that comes to mind right now. So this happened a while back and I was at my girlfriend's place and we were just at the start of the relationship. So things were new, things were nice and romantic and we were brushing our teeth at her place. And in the corner of my eye, I noticed her walk up to a houseplant in her bathroom and she grabs it by the pot and starts viciously shaking it up, like strangling it. And the first image that comes to mind is that Darla girl from Finding Nemo, where she's just shaking the bag with Nemo in it. And the thought that follows that is, I'm dating one of those. I'm dating a crazy chick. So I snap out of it and then I ask her, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And she proceeds to tell me that, oh, I'm literally just shaking the plant because when you do that, it simulates the natural effect that wind has in its natural environment, which strengthens its roots. And it's almost providing a traumatic experience to the plant, but through that traumatic experience, you're actually strengthening the roots. And then I have this light bulb moment in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a piece of content. Content. Like Gary Vee just pops up to my head and just like, content. And I go, huh. You know, this really reminds me of what relationships do and what I'm experiencing in real time through this relationships, which is essentially that, you know, my partner is essentially shaking up my roots. You know, she's bringing up all the things that I'm challenged by and that I need to work on. And although I can't see it, because it's happening under the surface, doesn't mean it's actually making a profound impact on me as a man. And what I realize is, you know, that's what relationships do. Despite how challenging they are, despite how triggering they may be sometimes, essentially they're shaking us up so we can develop a stronger foundation and be a stronger man, leader, and partner in that relationship. And that was a pretty profound realization that I had during that time from a very mundane moment of brushing my teeth at my partner's house. So again, opening loops, closing the loop, injecting a bit of humor throughout, but also starting with the end in mind. Now, whether you take that as a bit of inspiration or a profound realization, it started off from a very mundane, average moment in my life. And again, I touched on these 3 beats. And the more that you can touch on these 3 beats, again, the more memorable, the more impactful, and the more connected your audience will feel to the stories that you share. Summarize the 3 go-to techniques that I like to sprinkle throughout my emails, videos, or stories are: number 1, open a loop in the audience's mind using intrigue. Number 2 is start with the end in mind. Number 3 is normal twist, how to inject humor into your writing, into your stories. I trust that this video has been valuable for you. I'm going to leave some helpful links, some free gifts and resources in the description below so you can continue amplifying your own message, your own stories, and your impact to your audience one story at a time. I'll see you in the next video.